The morning the new maid arrived, the mansion was unusually quiet. The wide marble hallways, normally filled with the sounds of staff hurrying from one room to another, seemed empty now. Only a few workers remained after so many had left in the past months. Everyone knew the reason, though no one dared to speak about it aloud. The millionaire's son, a boy who had grown up in the comfort of wealth but not much affection, had chased them all away with his unpredictable moods and sharp tongue. The driver dropped the new maid at the gate, her small bag in hand, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and nervousness. She did not look like someone who belonged in a house as grand as this one. Her clothes were simple, her posture calm, and her steps careful. When she reached the front door, she paused, took a quiet breath, and pressed the bell. One of the older maids, who had somehow managed to survive the boy's temper for years, opened the door. She studied the new girl for a moment before stepping aside and letting her in. "Welcome," she said softly, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the air in the mansion. "They're waiting for you in the sitting room." The new maid nodded and followed her inside. Her eyes moved slowly, taking in the polished floors, the tall ceilings, the expensive paintings on the walls. She didn't stare in wonder the way most newcomers did. Instead, she simply observed, as though she wanted to understand how this household breathed before deciding how to fit in. The millionaire's wife sat on a sofa with perfect posture, her fingers wrapped around a porcelain teacup. She looked tired, as though the weight of the home had been resting on her shoulders alone. The father wasn't home yet, as usual. He spent much of his time away, leaving the mother to manage the house and the child on her own. When the new maid approached, the mother studied her for a long moment. "You understand this job is not easy," she said slowly. "Many people have tried. They don't last long. My son, he can be difficult. Very difficult." The new maid nodded politely. "I will do my best," she answered in a calm voice. She didn't promise anything dramatic. She didn't act confident, but she didn't look afraid either, and that alone surprised the mother. After giving her a few basic instructions, the mother signaled the older maid to show her the rest of the house. As they walked through the hallway, the older maid kept glancing at the new girl with curiosity. "You seem calm," she said softly. "Most people start panicking even before meeting him. He's not easy to work with." The new maid simply smiled. A small, quiet smile that didn't reveal much. "Children show their hearts in different ways," she replied. "Sometimes it takes a while to understand them." They reached the room prepared for her. It was small but clean, placed far from the family's main area, but close enough for her to hear if she was needed. She placed her bag on the bed and looked around. There wasn't much to the space. A simple bed, a small dresser, and a window that overlooked the side garden. But she seemed content. The older maid hesitated before speaking again. "You should know. He doesn't like new people. He doesn't trust anyone. He's rude," he yells, "and sometimes he throws things." Many workers left crying. The new maid's expression didn't change. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. "I will be careful." She unpacked her bag with slow, steady motions. She didn't seem eager to rush, nor did she seem intimidated by the warnings. She simply took in everything with an almost peaceful acceptance. When she finished, the older maid sighed and excused herself. A few minutes later, a loud thud echoed from upstairs, followed by a boy's frustrated shout. The new maid looked toward the ceiling but didn't move. She waited until the sound faded, then headed out to begin her first tasks. Her first job was simple: organize the books in the family library. The shelves were tall and filled with hundreds of books, though many were untouched. As she dusted and arranged them, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned slowly and found herself looking at the millionaire's son. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, staring at her with a mixture of suspicion and annoyance. He looked younger than she expected, not quite a teenager yet. His eyes were sharp, restless, filled with an energy that had no place to go. He didn't say anything at first. He just examined her as if trying to figure out what kind of person she was. "You're new," he finally said, his tone cold. "Yes," she replied gently. "You'll leave soon," he added, as if it were a fact. She didn't argue. She simply placed another book on the shelf. "Maybe," she said. But for now, I'm here to work." He frowned, not expecting such a simple answer. Most people tried to impress him, or talk to him in a sugary tone. She didn't. She worked quietly, almost peacefully, as though his presence didn't disturb her at all. "Do you even know what you're doing?" he asked sharply. She lifted her eyes for a moment and smiled slightly. "I know how to organize books," she replied. He opened his mouth to say something harsh, but then closed it again. He wasn't used to someone answering him without fear or irritation. He turned and walked out without another word. For the rest of the day, she continued her tasks with patience. She cleaned the dining room, helped in the kitchen, and made sure everything was in order. The staff watched her from a distance. They whispered among themselves, wondering how long she would last. Everyone had their guesses. Some said 2 days, some said a week. No one expected more. By evening, the mansion came alive with activity as the father finally returned home. He greeted his wife warmly, but barely noticed the new maid passing by. His attention was pulled quickly toward his son, who ran past him in the hallway. The boy barely looked up, muttering something under his breath before disappearing up the stairs. The parents exchanged a familiar, tired look. They had tried tutors, therapists, strict rules, gentle approaches. Nothing worked for long. He was polite in public, but at home, he let out all the frustration he didn't know how to express. That night, after dinner, the new maid walked past the boy's room and saw the door slightly open. She didn't mean to look inside, but when she stepped closer, she noticed something unusual. The boy sat in the middle of his room surrounded by scattered books and toys. His face looked tense, almost troubled. He wasn't shouting or angry, just overwhelmed. She didn't enter. She didn't speak. She simply placed the small tray she had brought near the door, a glass of warm milk and a folded napkin. Then she stepped away quietly. The boy noticed it a few minutes later. He looked at the tray, confused. No one had ever left something quietly for him, without lecturing or scolding. He walked toward it, touched the glass, and looked into the hallway. She was gone. The next morning, the routine began again. The maid worked in silence, moving through the rooms with soft steps. When she passed by the staircase, she saw the boy sitting there, watching her. He didn't speak, but his eyes followed her, curious. Later that day, something unexpected happened. As she was cleaning one of the sitting rooms, she heard a crash behind her. The boy had accidentally knocked over a small decorative box while trying to reach a toy he had left on the table. The lid broke as it hit the floor. He froze, expecting her to react the way others usually did, with anger or fear, but she simply bent down, picked up the pieces, and examined them carefully. "It can be fixed," she said calmly. He stared at her. "You're not going to shout?" She shook her head. It was an accident. He watched her for a long moment, uncertain. No one had spoken to him like that before, not in a long time at least. She took the broken box and set it aside gently. He frowned, confused by her kindness, then turned away quickly. But she noticed something small. His shoulders looked less tense. That evening, the mother called the staff into the dining room to check how the day had gone. She expected the new maid to complain or express frustration the way others had on their first day. Instead, the new maid simply said, "Everything went fine." The mother raised an eyebrow. "He didn't bother you?" "He is a child," the maid answered softly. "Children feel things more deeply than we think." The mother didn't know what to say to that. She nodded slowly and dismissed the staff. When the maid returned to her room that night, she sat by the window for a while, listening to the distant sounds of the house. She didn't seem tired, though she had worked all day. She just looked thoughtful, as if trying to understand the rhythm of the place, the unseen emotions in its walls. While she sat there, a faint sound echoed in the hallway. She stepped outside and saw the boy standing a few steps away. He looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the right words. She didn't pressure him. She simply waited. He finally said, "I saw you fix the box." His voice was quiet. "I did," she replied. "It looks new," he added. She nodded. Everything can be repaired if someone cares enough to take the time. He fell silent again, then turned and walked away. But this time, something was different. His footsteps didn't sound angry or frustrated. They sounded lighter. It was only her first day, yet something small had already begun shifting inside the mansion. No one noticed it fully, not yet, but the boy felt it. And in a silent way, the maid did too. The mansion, so used to tension and fear, felt a little warmer that night. And though the family didn't realize it, the arrival of the new maid had already started changing everything. The next morning started quietly, the way most mornings did in the mansion. The staff moved around carefully, always alert for the sound of the boy's footsteps or his sudden outbursts. But on this day, there was a soft shift in the air, almost like the house was waiting to see how things would unfold. The new maid woke up early, as she had always done in every place she worked. She tied her hair neatly, straightened her simple uniform, and stepped out of her room with a calm mind. Her first task was to check the breakfast area, make sure everything was set properly. She moved with gentle steps, arranging plates, folding napkins, and adjusting the smallest details. She made sure every corner looked neat but didn't hurry. Her calmness felt unusual in the mansion, where everyone normally rushed as if preparing for trouble. While she was working, she noticed the boy standing at the archway, watching her from a distance. He wasn't speaking, just observing. She didn't look at him directly, but she knew he was there. When people tried too hard to talk to him, he pulled away. So she let him watch in silence. After a long moment, he finally stepped closer. "Why do you wake up so early?" he asked. His voice didn't sound as sharp as usual. She looked at him with a soft expression. "Morning is the quietest time," she replied. "The house is still resting. It helps me start the day peacefully." He seemed to think about that. "I don't like mornings," he muttered. "That's okay. Not everyone does." He looked confused by her answer again. Most adults tried to correct him, teach him, or argue with him. She didn't. She simply accepted what he said. He sat down at the dining table without another word. The cook brought in his breakfast a few minutes later and placed the plate in front of him. He poked the food with his spoon but didn't eat right away. The new maid passed by and paused briefly. "If the food is too hot, wait a little. It will taste better when you're ready," she said gently. He didn't respond, but he finally took a small bite. She walked away, allowing him his space. Later in the morning, the mother asked the new maid to clean the sitting room near the staircase. That was usually the hardest place to work, because the boy used it as his corner to think, sulk, or throw small things when he got frustrated. The entire staff avoided that area when he was around, but the new maid simply nodded and headed there. When she entered the sitting room, she found the boy already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a book open in front of him. He wasn't reading it, but staring blankly at the page. She could tell something was bothering him. "Do you want me to come back later?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "You can clean." So she started dusting the shelves, organizing cushions, and wiping the small table. She didn't rush. She didn't move too loudly. She let him have his silence while she continued with her work. After a few minutes, suddenly said, "Everyone thinks I'm bad." She paused briefly, then continued cleaning. "Do you think you're bad?" she asked calmly. He shrugged, not looking at her. "People get scared of me. They always leave." She placed a cushion neatly on the sofa before answering. "Sometimes people leave because they are tired. Sometimes because they don't understand. That doesn't mean you are bad." He lifted his eyes slowly. "Why didn't you leave?" "It's only my second day," she said with a small, kind smile. He almost smiled back but hid it quickly. "You will leave," he said again, but there was less confidence in his voice this time. "We'll see," she replied. The boy didn't say anything else. But for the first time, he didn't look angry or annoyed. He just looked thoughtful. Later that afternoon, something unexpected happened. While the new maid was carrying folded laundry down the hallway, she heard the boy shouting from his room. His voice wasn't full of anger this time. It sounded like frustration mixed with worry. She hurried to the doorway and saw him sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers and school materials. His handwriting workbook lay open, the pages messy with scribbled lines. His pencil had snapped in half. He looked up and saw her. Instead of yelling at her to leave, he stayed quiet. His eyes looked troubled. She stepped inside slowly. "Do you need help?" "No," he said quickly, wiping his face with his sleeve. She didn't push him. Instead, she crouched down near the scattered papers. "Writing is not easy when you're upset," she said softly. "I'm not upset," he answered. But his voice shook. She lifted the broken pencil gently. "It happens. Even adults break pencils sometimes." He stared at her hand. "My tutor left yesterday," he said quietly. "I heard," she replied. "He said I don't listen. He said I make things hard." She nodded slowly. "Maybe you were frustrated. Maybe he didn't know how to understand you." He looked at her, surprised. "It's always my fault," he whispered. She shook her head. "It's not about fault. It's about understanding what's happening inside you." He didn't understand her fully, but her tone made him feel heard, something he hadn't felt in a long time. She placed the broken pencil aside, picked up another from the floor. "Do you want to try again?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. She didn't sit too close. She didn't take the pencil from him. She simply guided him with a calm voice. "Slowly this time. Don't rush. Letters don't like being pushed." That made him blink. "Letters don't like being pushed?" She nodded with a playful seriousness. "They get crooked when they feel pressure. But if you let your hand relax, they sit nicely on the line." He tried again, slower this time. She watched quietly, letting him find his own way. And after a few minutes, the messy scribbles changed into more careful strokes. When he finished one line, he looked up at her. "Is this better?" She examined the page. "Much better," she said honestly. He didn't smile, but his face softened. Later that day, when the father returned home, he noticed something unusual. The boy walked past him, holding his workbook, not angrily, not carelessly, but with a sense of accomplishment. He didn't say anything, but his steps seemed lighter. The father exchanged a puzzled look with his wife. "Did something happen today?" he asked. The mother didn't know. She had been busy with appointments and guests. But in the kitchen, the older staff were whispering about the new maid. They had all seen it, the boy walking calmly beside her in the hallway, not shouting, not complaining. "She must have some gift," one of them said quietly. Another shook her head. "Or she just knows how to talk to him." The mother overheard part of their conversation and became curious. She didn't want to get her hopes up too soon. Many workers had started well, but ended in disaster. She decided to watch quietly. That evening, after dinner, the family sat in the living room. The boy usually avoided family time, but tonight he sat near the edge of the sofa, holding his workbook. He wasn't close to his parents, but he wasn't hiding in another room either. The new maid walked by with a tray of tea. The mother noticed the boy's eyes follow her, not in fear, not in irritation, but with a sense of trust she had never seen before. When the tea was served, the boy looked up at the new maid and said quietly, "Thank you." The mother almost dropped her cup. He had never thanked a worker before. The father blinked in disbelief. He looked at the maid, then at his son, then back again. Something was happening, something none of them understood yet. The maid simply nodded at the boy, acknowledging his words without making a big deal out of it. She didn't praise him loudly. She didn't act surprised. She just accepted it naturally, and maybe that was why it felt so powerful. Later, when the family went upstairs, the boy paused at the staircase and looked back at her. He didn't speak, but his eyes held a question, a silent one. "Are you staying? Or will you leave like everyone else?" She understood the unspoken worry. "I'll be here tomorrow," she said softly. He held her eyes for a moment, then nodded and walked up the stairs. When she went to her room that night, she sat by the window again. The house was quiet, but not the heavy, stressed silence it often had. It felt warmer, calmer. The boy, sitting alone in his room, touched the corner of his workbook. He didn't know how to explain it, but the new maid made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: safe. The staff didn't know what to expect next. The parents didn't know what to think. And the boy didn't know why this woman felt different from all the others, but something had definitely begun, and the house could feel it. The next few days passed quietly, but something inside the mansion had clearly begun to shift. No one could explain it, and no one wanted to say it out loud too soon. But the change was there, subtle, gentle, and almost unbelievable. The new maid continued her work the same way she had from the first day. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't talk too much. She didn't rush. Her calm way of moving through the hallways brought a strange sense of peace to a house that had been filled with tension for far too long. On the third morning of her stay, she was arranging fresh flowers in a vase near the staircase when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't turn right away. She knew who it was. The boy stood on the last step, rubbing his eyes sleepily. His hair was messy, his expression unreadable, but he was awake earlier than usual. Normally, getting him out of his room before noon was a battle. "You're up early today," she said softly. He shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." She placed one more flower into the vase. "Bad dream?" I hesitated. "I don't remember." She didn't push him. Instead, she moved aside to give him space to walk past. He didn't move. Instead, he stared at the flowers she had just arranged. They were simple ones from the garden, white and yellow, nothing fancy. "They look different," he said. "How so?" she asked. "They look nicer than usual." She smiled a little. "Maybe because they're placed with care." He didn't say anything else, but he followed her into the dining area. She didn't tell him to sit or to eat. She simply went about her tasks, wiping the table, straightening chairs, making small adjustments. A few minutes later, he sat down on his own. The cook brought out his breakfast, placing it gently in front of him, looked at the food, then glanced at the maid as if waiting for her reaction. "Eat slowly," she said mildly. "Your stomach wakes up later than your mind." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means mornings are hard for a lot of people. Give yourself time." He took a slow bite, and for the first time in a long while, breakfast did not turn into a battlefield. Later that day, the boy was supposed to spend time in the study room. His mother wanted him to catch up on his reading and homework, but he usually avoided both. The tutors they tried to hire never lasted long, and most of the staff refused to even walk near the study room when he was inside. But when she walked by the study room that afternoon, she found him sitting at the table, a book open in front of him. He wasn't reading, but he was trying to. She could see it in the way he tapped his fingers on the table, as if struggling to focus. "Is the book difficult?" she asked gently. He didn't look up. "I hate reading. Why, it's boring. And the words move everywhere." She pulled a chair near the table but didn't sit. "Words don't move. They do for me," he snapped. She understood immediately. "They get blurry." Like he nodded once, quickly, like he didn't want her to know too much. "Sometimes we see things differently than others," she said. "It doesn't mean you can't learn. It only means you need a different way." "No one listens," he muttered. "I'm listening," she said softly. He looked at her then, really looked. His expression wasn't angry. It was tired. "Want me to read to you for a little?" she asked. He hesitated before nodding. She didn't sit too close. She kept enough distance so he didn't feel crowded. She picked up the book, turned to the page he was on, and began reading slowly, letting each word settle in the air. He watched the page while she read, tracing the sentences with his finger. For the first time in a long while, he didn't complain. He didn't throw the book, didn't storm out. When she finished a chapter, he surprised them both. "Can we do another one?" "Of course," she replied. By evening, the mother noticed something strange. The boy hadn't thrown anything, hadn't shouted, hadn't slammed his door. He had even spent almost an hour in the study room, something that had not happened in months. She pulled the new maid aside in the hallway. "What did you do today?" she asked. "Just my work," the maid answered simply. "I saw him sitting with a book. He tried hard," she replied. The mother stared at her for a long moment. "I don't understand how you're doing this." The maid lowered her eyes. "Maybe he just needs someone to be patient with him." The mother didn't say anything else. He wasn't sure whether to feel hopeful or scared. Hope had disappointed her too many times before. That night, as the lights in the house dimmed, the boy found himself wandering the hallway. His mind was restless, but not in the familiar, angry way. He felt something unfamiliar, something warm. He paused near the maid's doorway again. She was sitting by the window like before, her hands folded on her lap. "Why do you sit there every night?" he asked from the hallway. She turned slowly. "It helps me think." "What do you think about?" "Many things. The day, the people I met, what I learned, but I can change tomorrow." He looked confused. "Why would you want to change anything? You're just a maid." She smiled gently. "Everyone can change something, no matter who they are." He walked inside the room without waiting for permission, but she didn't mind. He looked around, taking in her small, simple space. "It's tiny," he said. "It's enough," she replied. "Don't you want something bigger?" "A bigger room doesn't make life better. Peace does." He didn't fully understand, but something about her words made him quiet. He sat on the edge of her bed. "Do you think I'm a bad person?" he asked suddenly. She shook her head. "I think you're a boy who feels more than others realize." He blinked, unsure how to respond to that. "Why do you get angry?" she asked softly. "I don't know. It just happens." "Does something hurt inside when it happens?" He nodded. "Anger is usually a loud way of showing quiet pain," she said. He stared at her, stunned that she understood something he had never told anyone. "Do you want to learn a way to make that pain quieter?" He nodded slowly. She taught him a simple breathing pattern, slow, gentle breaths. Nothing complicated, just a small tool he could use when his emotions felt too heavy. He tried it, awkward at first, then more naturally. "It feels weird." He said. "Weird is okay," she replied. He stayed a little longer, not speaking, just sitting in the calm of her small room. Eventually, he went back to his own room, feeling strangely lighter. The next morning brought another unexpected surprise. Usually, the boy avoided talking to the staff and refused to help with anything. But on this day, he walked into the kitchen while the maid was preparing the breakfast setup. "Can I help?" he asked quietly. The cook nearly dropped a spoon. The maid turned around slowly. "If you want," she replied. He picked up a stack of small plates and followed her instructions carefully. He wasn't used to doing such tasks. But he looked focused, almost proud of himself when he placed the plates neatly on the table. When he finished, he looked at her. "Is this good?" She nodded. "Very good." A tiny smile appeared on his lips. The mother, standing at the doorway, watched everything with wide eyes. She didn't understand what she was seeing. Santha, same boy who used to throw tantrums over the smallest things, was arranging plates like it was nothing. When he left the room, the mother approached the maid. "I don't know how you're doing this," she whispered, her voice filled with both hope and fear. "But whatever you're doing, please don't stop." "I'm just being patient," the maid said gently. "No," the mother said. "You're doing more than that." Later that afternoon, while the maid was sweeping the hallway, she heard the boy laughing. It was a small laugh, but a real one. She looked toward the sound and saw him playing with a small puzzle toy he had abandoned months ago. He hadn't laughed like that in years. He noticed her standing there and held up the toy. "I finished it," he said proudly. She nodded. "Well done." He walked toward her, the toy in hand. "Can I show you something?" "Of course." He led her to his room. It wasn't as messy as it usually was. Some books were stacked neatly on the desk. The broken box she had repaired sat carefully on a shelf. "I cleaned," he said, almost shyly. "A little." "Oh." She looked around with genuine admiration. "Looks wonderful." He looked relieved, as though he had been waiting for her approval. "Do you think I'm getting better?" he asked softly. "You're trying," she said. "And trying is how people grow." He nodded. "I want to be good." Her eyes softened. "You already are. You just needed someone to see it." Swallowed hard. And for a moment, she saw something fragile in him, something he kept hidden from the world. By evening, a warm glow spread through the mansion. The boy sat with his parents during dinner, not talking much, but not running away either. He even tried a new dish, which surprised his father. After dinner, he walked past the maid again, pausing for a moment. "I'm glad you came here," he said quietly. She smiled. "I'm glad too." And with that, he went up the stairs. No shouting, no throwing, no slamming doors. The mansion, once filled with noise and frustration, now felt calmer than it had in years. Everyone sensed it. Everyone sensed it, even the walls seemed to breathe easier. And without knowing it, the boy had taken his first steps toward becoming someone the family had always hoped he could be because of one person. One quiet, patient, gentle presence, the new maid, and the change had only just begun. The news about the maid's past quietly reached the walls of the mansion like a soft whisper carried by the wind. No one said anything aloud at first, but everyone felt a shift. The father had not meant for anyone to know he was looking into her background. He only wanted answers to why his son, a boy who refused to listen to tutors, doctors, and even him, had suddenly started changing. He sat in his office with the file in his hands for a long time before opening it. When he finally did, he read slowly, carefully, almost afraid he would find something troubling. But what he found instead was something that made him sit back in his chair and take a deep breath. She had spent years working in a home for children who struggled with anger issues, loneliness, or emotional challenges. She had helped them learn how to communicate, how to express their feelings, and how to trust people again. The thought surprised him. He never expected that someone so young, so quiet, so ordinary-looking could carry such a deep understanding of human emotions. He remembered her calm voice, her patient smile, and the way she listened even when she did not speak much. Suddenly it made sense. She was not just doing her job. She was guiding his son in a way no one else ever had. Meanwhile, the son had no idea any of this was happening behind closed doors. For him, life had started to feel different in small ways he could not fully describe. He found himself waking up with less heaviness in his chest. He felt less angry when something went wrong. Even when he dropped something or stumbled over his own frustration, the maid was there not to scold him, not to judge him, but to calmly show him another way to handle the moment. One afternoon, he followed her into the garden without thinking about it. The breeze was cool, and she was trimming a few plants near the corner. He stood beside her quietly, watching her hands move. She did everything gently, as if she respected even the smallest leaf. "Why do you do that?" he asked suddenly. She looked up, surprised. "Do what?" "Cut them slowly. Most people just chop everything fast." She smiled a little. "If you cut carelessly, the plant gets stressed. If you cut softly, it grows stronger." He thought about that. It was quiet in the garden, and he felt strangely safe there, even though he was not used to feeling safe anywhere. "Is that why you talk to me like that?" he asked after a moment. She paused, then nodded gently. "I think everyone grows better when they are handled with care." He didn't respond, but she noticed the way his shoulders relaxed. It was the first time he let himself believe someone was not trying to control him. She never forced him to change. She only guided him, step by step. Inside the house, the mother watched these little moments from a distance. She was a woman who always looked polished, busy, and composed. But even she felt something inside her soften when she saw how the maid and her son interacted. She approached her husband one evening. "I think she's special," the mother said quietly. Her husband, who was still holding the file, nodded slowly. "I read her background. She used to help children with behavioral challenges. She never mentioned it." The mother felt a little guilty. "We treated her like any other worker. But she's doing more for him than anyone we've ever hired." The father leaned back in his chair. "She didn't come here to fix him. But somehow, she did." The mother sat down next to him, her hands clasped together. "What do we do now?" He did not answer immediately. Part of him wanted to give the maid a better position, more respect, maybe even more trust. But another part of him worried. Was it too much responsibility for her? Would she feel pressured? Would acknowledging her skill make things awkward? In the middle of all this uncertainty, the maid was completely unaware that her past had been uncovered. She simply continued her quiet routine, doing her work, looking after the small details and offering the boy a steady presence. One day, she found him in the study with his books open but untouched. He looked frustrated. "It doesn't make sense," he muttered, tapping the page. "I'm trying, but it just doesn't go into my head." She pulled up a chair beside him. "Maybe you're trying too hard. Sometimes you just need a different way to see things." He looked at her, waiting. She took the book, drew a simple diagram on a blank page, and explained the idea slowly. Something clicked. He felt a small spark of understanding. "You make it easy," he said quietly. "No," she replied, shaking her head lightly. "You understand it because you're capable. I'm just showing you a path." He looked at her differently in that moment, not as a maid, not as someone who worked for his family, but as someone who genuinely cared about him. Days passed, and the boy's behavior continued to improve. He started greeting people more politely. He helped pick up things he dropped instead of waiting for someone else to fix it. He even apologized once when he accidentally snapped at a staff member. That single apology made. The entire cleaning staff whispered to each other in shock. The boy who used to shout at everyone now felt bad when he hurt someone's feelings. The parents noticed everything. The father invited the maid to his office one morning. She walked in nervously, unsure if she had done something wrong. "Sit down," he said gently. She obeyed, her hands resting on her lap. "I want to ask you something," he began slowly. "My son has changed a lot since you came. What are you doing differently?" She blinked, surprised. "I don't know if I'm doing anything special, sir. I just listen to him. Most people correct him right away when he gets upset, but I wait. I let him feel his emotions, then I guide him gently. Kids don't need force. They need understanding." Her words touched something deep inside the father. For years, he had been struggling with his son's behavior, feeling helpless and frustrated. Hearing her speak so simply, so honestly, made everything sound less impossible. "Did you learn this somewhere?" he asked casually, though he already knew. She hesitated for a second. "I used to work with children who had trouble managing their emotions, but I didn't write it on my papers because I didn't want to look overqualified. I just wanted a job where I could work quietly." The father felt a wave of respect wash over him. She was not just humble, she was wise. She could have demanded a better position, but she chose to start from the bottom without complaint. "You should have mentioned it," he said softly. She smiled a little. "Sometimes it's better to let people see your work before you talk about it." That simple sentence stayed with him long after she left the room, as days turned into weeks. The bond between the boy and the maid grew stronger. He didn't cling to her, but he constantly looked for her presence. If he achieved something small, like completing a lesson or controlling his anger, he always looked toward her, as if seeking quiet approval. One evening, the family gathered in the living room. The boy sat on the sofa reading a book, something he rarely did before. The parents exchanged a glance filled with quiet pride. The maid walked by to place a tray on the table. The boy looked up and said softly, "Thank you." The mother almost dropped her cup. The father pretended not to react, but inside, he felt amazed. The maid nodded at the boy with a warm smile, then walked away. She didn't realize how big that moment was for the family. Later that night, the father and mother sat together. "We owe her more than we can express," the mother whispered. The father nodded. "And I think it's time we show her that we see her, truly see her." But he wasn't thinking of a simple raise or a kind word. He had something deeper in mind, something that would change the maid's life. Just as much as she had changed their son's. He just didn't know how to tell her yet. The story was far from over, but one thing was clear to everyone in the mansion. Something extraordinary was happening, something none of them could have imagined. When the quiet young maid first walked through their door, the evening sun dipped slowly behind the tall walls of the mansion, painting the sky in soft orange and purple shades. The entire house glowed warmly, but inside, something even warmer was unfolding, something no one in the family had ever imagined. When the maid first arrived, the boy sat in the living room with a book open on his lap. He wasn't reading it. He was waiting. Waiting for her. He had grown used to her gentle presence, her steady guidance, her quiet confidence that made him feel capable when everything inside him felt messy. He didn't say it aloud, but she had become the closest thing to comfort he had ever known. She walked in carrying a basket of folded clothes, her steps soft as always. The boy noticed her instantly, and his face brightened. "Are you done with your work?" he asked. She smiled a little. "Almost." "Why?" He hesitated. I wanted to show you something. If you have time. I always have time for you, she answered gently. Those words made him sit a bit straighter, as if someone had given his heart a small push of courage. The parents, sitting nearby, watched the moment quietly. They exchanged a glance. This small interaction felt like a final confirmation of how deeply she had impacted their son. The boy took her to the study room. On the table lay a handwritten note he had been working on for days. His handwriting wasn't perfect, and his sentences were short, but every word came from somewhere inside him. He held the paper out to her shyly. I wrote this for you. She unfolded it gently. Her eyes moved slowly across the page. It said, asterisk, thank you for being patient with me. Asterisk, asterisk. Thank you for helping me be better. Asterisk, asterisk. I don't know how to say it properly, but I'm glad you are here. Asterisk. By the time she reached the last line, her eyes had turned shiny. She blinked away the tears quickly so he wouldn't feel uncomfortable. This means more than you know, she said softly. He looked relieved. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying because of you. Not because anyone forced me. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, not too long. Not too emotional, just enough to let him know she understood. I see your effort every day, she said. You've grown so much. You should be proud of yourself. The boy felt something warm in his chest, a feeling he rarely felt: pride. Real pride. What neither of them realized was that the father had been standing at the doorway, watching silently. He didn't interrupt. He didn't want to disturb the moment. But seeing his son speak with such honesty and calmness made his heart feel heavy in the best way. Later that night, the father called the maid to his office again. She entered carefully, unsure why she had been called. The father gestured for her to sit. There's something I want to discuss with you, he began. She nodded, hands neatly folded. I've been watching the changes in my son, he continued. I see the calmness in him, the patience, the confidence. It's something I thought would take years, but you helped him find it much faster. She shook her head gently. He did the work. I only guided him. No, the father said firmly. You gave him something no tutor, no specialist, no staff member could give him. You gave him trust. She lowered her eyes, modest as always. He took a breath. We would like to offer you a new position, not as a maid, but as someone who will work closely with our son, guide him, support him, help him continue this growth. A personal mentor, if you're willing. Her eyes widened slightly. Sir, I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this. You deserve it, the father said kindly. And you've earned our trust. All of us. She felt something warm bloom inside her chest. She had always kept her expectations small, her dreams quiet. She came to the mansion only to work, nothing more. But now, she was being offered a chance to do something meaningful, something she was truly good at. I would be honored, she said softly. The father smiled with relief. Then it's decided. Word spread quietly among the household staff. Everyone respected her already, but now they admired her even more. No one felt jealous. Instead, they all agreed no one deserved it more than she did. The next morning, the boy noticed she wasn't doing her normal tasks. She wasn't carrying laundry or cleaning like before. Instead, she sat beside him with his books, helping him plan his day. Did something change? He asked. She nodded. Your parents gave me a new role. I'll be focusing on you now. Your learning, your routine, your growth. His eyes lit up. Really? You're staying? I'm staying, she said with a warm smile. He didn't say anything more, but she saw the relief on his face. He'd been afraid she might leave one day like the others, but now he knew she wasn't going anywhere. As days passed, their bond grew stronger. He learned to express himself without shouting. He learned how to calm down when he felt frustrated, and he learned that listening wasn't a weakness. One evening, something unexpected happened. The family had gathered in the dining hall. The boy stood up suddenly. Everyone looked at him, confused. He cleared his throat nervously. I want to say something. His voice trembled, but he continued. I know I wasn't easy to deal with before. I know I made things hard for everyone. But I'm trying. And I want to thank the person who helped me the most. He turned toward the maid. You helped me see things differently. You helped me change. And I want everyone to know that. I'm grateful. Truly. The room fell silent. Not the uncomfortable kind of silence. This one was full of emotion, full of disbelief, full of pride. The father's eyes softened. The mother pressed a hand against her mouth, trying not to cry. The maid stood still, her heart beating fast. She never expected such a moment, especially not in front of the entire family. Thank you, she said quietly, bowing her head slightly. No, the boy said, shaking his head. Thank you. That moment changed everything. From that day on, the maid was no longer seen as just a worker. She was seen as someone who had transformed a boy's life, a person who brought peace into a home that once felt tense and chaotic. Her new role became official. She accompanied the boy in his lessons, supported him through challenges, and helped him navigate his feelings. The parents trusted her completely. The staff respected her, and the boy looked up to her with genuine admiration. Months passed and the boy continued to grow. He learned to control his temper. He became more patient. He even made his first real friend at school. Every time he achieved something new, he shared it with her first. One afternoon, the father approached her in the hallway. You changed our son, he said simply. She shook her head gently. He changed himself. I only showed him the way. The father smiled thoughtfully. Sometimes showing the way is the hardest part. She didn't answer, but she felt her heart swell. She had never wanted recognition. Receiving it reminded her that kindness didn't go unnoticed. As time went on, the mansion felt different. Softer, warmer, lighter. Everyone felt it. And it all began the day the quiet maid stepped into their home with nothing but her patience, her steady hands, and her gentle heart. The family never forgot the transformation she brought. The boy, now calmer and more confident, held onto her guidance like a compass pointing him in the right direction. And the maid who once entered the mansion simply looking for honest work found herself becoming a part of something much bigger. She had changed life, and in doing so, she had changed her own.